Um, so it's good to see everyone. You all are stuck with me teaching this morning because like Lee is out of town, Sarah's out of town. So this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Exodus 32, which is the story of the golden calf. So first of all, what I'd love for us to start with is just kind of what is it that you know about the golden calf? What are some of the things that you know about the story, things that you find interesting, things you've been taught about it? So just kind of give me some background here of the golden calf as you know it.
So I can give you what I remember from like what I was taught. I don't know if this would be what I was taught in Sunday school because it seems a little much to teach in Sunday school, but you know, the gist of it would be that while Moses was up on the mountain talking with God, that the rest of the Israelites got impatient and, you know, this is how it was taught, you know, and decided that they were going to make an idol of a god for themselves, like the idols that they knew from Egypt, from slavery in Egypt. And so they took up a collection of all of the gold from jewelry and whatnot, and melted it and formed a golden calf to worship. So that's the Lutheran Sunday school version of what I remember.
Nice. Was there like what were they called? Flannograms?
Oh yeah, flannel graphs.
Flannel-graphs. That's it. Yeah. Awesome. Anybody else? What other details do you remember? What other things have you been taught about? How does it make you feel? What, you know, is it confusing? Is it interesting? Is it, yeah. Looks like I picked a good subject to talk about this morning.
Yeah,
go for it.
Hi, everyone. So I know that like initially Moses goes up on a mountain to talk with God, and then he comes back down on the mountain like when everything is happening. And he ends up breaking the tablets that God makes initially. And so he has to go back up the mountain and get tablets again, which makes the process even longer.
Yeah. He just wanted to work out. What was it, a Monty Python scene where he's like, these 11, one falls, 10 commandments.
15, and it was Mel Brooks.
My bad. Yes, Paul, thank you. Excellent. Anybody else have any other memories of this? Any other pieces of it? Hi, Kitty.
Oh, it didn't go well for the people that whose idea it was to form the golden calf.
Okay. Yep. 3,000 people were slaughtered by the Levites.
When I think about it, I think of it in he broke the tablets. That didn't ban him from reaching the promised land, but you know, using a stick with the rock and whatever that.
Well, rocks are protected species in the desert.
Right. Yeah, I didn't reach that part in the discipleship.
Yeah. All right. Any other tidbits or anything that you remember? All right. So the first thing I want you to do is someone read for me and then tell us what version of the text you're reading. But someone read Genesis, Exodus 32, verse 1. And let me know what translation you're using. And we're going to see if we can collectively amongst us have a handful of translations.
I can start with NIV.
Perfect. Thanks, Andrew.
When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him."
Perfect. All right, someone else other than an NIV. Just want to try and get one or two more.
I have the CSB.
Yeah, please.
When the people saw that Moses delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make gods for us, who will go before us, because this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him."
Excellent. Thank you. Any other versions?
I've got a easy to read version. So
Perfect.
the people saw that a long time had passed and Moses had not come down from the mountain. So they gathered around Aaron. They said to him, "Look, Moses led us out of the land of Egypt, but we don't know what's happened to him. So make us some gods to go before us and lead us."
All right, perfect. So let me ask you a couple questions about this that I think is really important for us. And you know, one of my passions is trying to help people understand how to read and study the Bible. And in this, so one of the ways that I think is a good way to kind of begin that process is sometimes to break a verse down. And so let me give you the example I'm thinking of. I'm going to read the first, this is from the JPS. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him. Now, I know this one says against, but let's leave that aside so we don't get stuck in the word against or gathered around. But what would we expect the people to be saying to Moses in this instance? Like if you were writing this story or you were the Israelites, Moses has been gone for a while. What do you expect them to say here? I would argue it's not, well, Moses has been gone, so sucks to be him. Let's make something to replace him. What is it that you would expect them to be asking of Aaron? Like maybe, do you think some of us should go look for him? Do you think he's okay?
Yeah, I was just thinking general, like, where is he? What's taking so long? Why has he abandoned us?
Right. Or yeah, that's a great one, Tana. You know, thinking about abandonment. Yeah. Are we deserted? Yeah. Good, Craig. Yeah. That whole idea of abandonment, deserted. Any other things that you would think of? So that's something I want you guys to consider as we read different passages in the text, as we discover more things in scripture, is to stop and kind of say, what would I expect the people's response to be? And then look at what the actual response is in the text and then begin to wrestle with, but why did they respond this way? So let me ask you that question. So why do you think they didn't respond the way that seems obvious that they should have? Instead, they responded this way.
You know, for a little context, Don, I apologize that my memory is rusty. But I remember that, you know, it was like God appeared like a pillar of smoke or something.
Yep, pillar of smoke and fire. Yeah.
To guide them. And so, and then there were different ways that weren't there different ways that they sort of like created a temple out in the desert for?
They're about to do that now. They're in the midst of
okay.
that right now in the Exodus story.
Okay.
Building the ark and the tabernacle. Yep.
So they had some kind of visual representation of God that wasn't Moses, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But was that visual representation there when Moses was up on the mountain?
Yeah, it doesn't say.
I guess Craig is kind of getting at what my questions were leading to, which is like, did they see Moses as like the connection to God? And so therefore, if Moses wasn't there, they felt like they needed to create something else. Aaron wasn't good enough. But, you know.
So you're asking a great question. Wade, it looks like you have something to say.
Yeah, it was, I think I always picture it as when Moses is up on the mountain, it's this kind of child's drawing of a mountain where it's an upside down triangle with a little snowy peak. And like from wherever you are, you can see the top of the mountain, and like that it's almost like, the Israelites should have been able to see, that something was happening up there, but like that's not how mountains work. And so so this idea that that they don't know. Yes, Craig, it is also a triangle. so just the idea that it's the not knowing, and it's the having like everything we've seen so far is them kind of arguing about leadership and Moses's leadership, and being convinced to follow Moses, and that Moses is the one that they should be following, out here in the desert. And so so I think once he's gone, there's kind of this this vacuum of, as Tana and Craig were saying, have we lost our connection to God or the gods? Or although it is kind of a slap at Aaron, where they're like, oh, Moses is gone, no one can lead us now. Aaron, no one can lead us. So, but they have like so far like established that Moses is someone that they should lead despite all of his flaws.
Yeah. Paul, I see you have your hand up.
So a couple of chapters before this, when Moses is actually going up to the mountain, there's kind of like a discussion of like who can go up with him, and it like, because like there's smoke and stuff like around the mountain at the time, and like the people are really afraid about it, and so like I feel like there's a lot of fear in general regarding everything that Moses is doing. And so it's like the people are impatient, but they're also like afraid of what's going on. Like you can see their anxiety even before Moses goes up the mountain, for different reasons. Part of me kind of wonders if maybe they think that like he died in the process, because they're initially very afraid. And I know like it's kind of a theme in the Old Testament that like if you see God, you'll die, period. So I part of me thinks that that's maybe a little bit of their reasoning.
Yeah. So great thought. So this is all good. Let me see what. So a couple comments in the chat. Their magic man disappeared, and they'd been waiting for an opportunity to create something to worship that they could control. I think that's such an interesting thought. I think that all the time, what happens when I get abandoned, death, people leaving their job, a disillusion, my routine would be shattered. Yeah, it's Paul. Go ahead if you have another thought, or I don't know if you.
I just didn't take that thing down.
Okay, no problem. So what I want to kind of point us to a little bit here is that something that often isn't taught in Lutheran Sunday school, maybe yours it did, Wade, but is that they made the golden calf to replace Moses, not God. So when you read this, it says, come, make us a God who shall go before us. For that man Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what happened. So this golden calf is meant to replace, and this is one of the comments in the chat that was getting at that, was meant to replace Moses. Because later they say, and then the next day they had a festival to the Lord, which uses more terms of such as like a Yahweh, as opposed to Elohim, which is often used for someone that could just be a demigod or someone who is godlike. So first of all, the first question I want to ask is, how did they come to the conclusion that Moses was a demigod of some sort? And to replace Moses, they had to replace it with another god. How did they even come up with this idea? Where did that come from? So someone read Exodus 7, verse 1. Not all at once. It'll be hard on the speakers for people.
All right, this is NIV again.
Okay.
Then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet.
Yes. So Moses and Aaron are set up as a demigod and prophet in this picture. And so when Moses goes and talks to Pharaoh, he's going and talking to Pharaoh as if he himself is a demigod, and Aaron, because remember, if you remember at the burning bush, one of Moses's objections was, I don't speak well. Or maybe he said, I don't speak good. I don't know. I don't know if it was about grammar. So he says, I don't speak well. And so, I need someone to speak for me. And so God gives him Aaron as his prophet that speaks on behalf, that speaks for this individual, Moses, as a demigod. So what do we hear when God refers to the Exodus prior to this scene? How does God talk about how the people came out of Egypt? What does he say? Or what does God say? Not necessarily he, but what does God say about the Exodus? What is God's role in it? I might be asking a more complicated question than is necessary for a simple answer, which is, you are my people that I brought out of Egypt, right? Up until this moment, we always hear God saying, I brought you out of Egypt. But what happens here in verse 1? What do the Israelites say?
Moses brought them out.
Yeah, so the Israelites here are saying Moses brought us out. So these are all building up to be very important, and fear has a lot to do with it. So let me give you another example. So in verse 4, someone want to read verse 4? Andrew, I know you have your text right there, so maybe you'd be willing to just read the NIV of verse 4 for us.
Of 7.
I'm sorry, of 32 verse 4.
He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. And they said, these are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.
Okay, so now another thing has changed. Our first instance of fake news, well, maybe not. It might have been in Genesis 2 when the serpent said, if you eat from this, you will surely die. Or eat or touch. So in this picture, like, first of all, it's not quite accurate that Moses brought them out of Egypt. Yes, Moses was the figurehead that brought them out of Egypt. By verse 4, they want to replace Moses and say, and this is the God that brought us out of Egypt. Why? Why are they doing this? Yes, Craig, you are correct. Technically, the gold was with them. So why are they doing this? Why is it so important to them? And I'm going to tell you, it has to do with fear, that they keep attributing everything to something other than Yahweh. Why? Paul, I thought when you said a few minutes ago, like if you go back a few chapters, I was like, oh man, he's gonna hit the thing that I was thinking about for this. And so the answer is to go back a few chapters. So where, going back a few chapters, can we see why they feel like they need this buffer between them and God, and that they actually want to give credit to something else? Because they can't see God. I mean, yeah, that's a possibility. Just the tangibleness of something. Someone read Exodus 14, verses 10 through 14, and we'll get a sense of the Israelites' perception, and it'll be recognizable because we see it all throughout the Exodus journey.
14, 10 through 14.
Please.
As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and they were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still."
So this scene, God is saying, I'm going to deliver you from Egypt, but they're terrified. They believe that they're going to die in this spot. You know, it's almost a joke of, what were they out of graves? Cemeteries all full in Egypt. You brought us out into the desert, so it'd be easier to bury us. And so this picture of them is this overwhelming fear. And then Paul, you touched on it, where they were afraid to even go up on the mountain. In fact, in that scene, Paul, that I think is also really important, is God says to Aaron, "Now go down and do what?" What does it, when Paul, the one you were referencing, God tells Moses to go down and get who and bring back up onto the mountain? Anybody know? Paul, if you know, that's great.
Can you say that again?
Yeah. So when God is talking to Moses on the mountain, around the section that you referred to earlier, a few chapters behind, God says to Moses, "Now go down and get something or someone and bring back." And what is that thing or that entity that God wants Moses to go get and bring back?
So I see go down and come back with Aaron.
Yes, but Aaron doesn't go back. Moses doesn't go down and get Aaron and bring him back. He leaves Aaron. So this is a moment where Moses isn't even functioning the way that God has asked him to function, right? You know, oftentimes people will be like, "Why doesn't Aaron get in trouble for this golden calf?" And I would argue, well, first of all, he shouldn't have even been down there. God told Moses to go down, get Aaron, and bring him back up, and Moses didn't do this. And these are the moments that we're seeing the shift from it being God did the deliverance of Israel out of Egypt to it now being accredited to Moses. And Moses is the one. And Moses might be taking his demigod stature a little too serious, right? Because Moses starts doing things on his own. In fact, when God's angry, Moses even says, "Nope, I'll handle it." And when God says to Moses later in 32 to go down and look, he says, "Go down and see what your people are doing, the ones you brought out of Egypt." Right? And so the whole scene is beginning to shift from God being the deliverer, the people fearing God, that God is in some way twisted and only has desire to harm the people. And Moses, who has the people believe in some way, Moses is the one that has actually delivered them. He is the one that does what? he shields them from God. Can you kind of see that? That idea that they think in some way Moses shields them from God. Does that make sense? Not very many cameras are on, so I can't get people's facial expression. So yes, exactly, Craig. I would argue hitting the rock with the stick was actually the last straw. And it's why it's a collection of all these things, right? In fact, it took, if to kind of keep going with that thread a little bit, Moses has to be told by his father-in-law, who is a pagan priest, to stop trying to judge everyone on his own. So even a pagan priest in this scene, which would be shocking to the listener and the reader, had to come to Moses and say, it's not good for you to be the only judge. You need to have other people judging alongside you. So Moses has had this history that's kind of building, and we're seeing it come out here because now Moses is gone and the people feel like they need to replace Moses because Moses has set himself up to as a, you could argue a replacement, you could argue a more tangible, a more kind version, perceived version of God. Wade, did you have something?
I was thinking back to one of the comments about control and and so when you were talking about fear, it's not necessarily like, I don't necessarily think of it as wanting something that they can control, but wanting to know that someone is in control. And so whether that is Yahweh, whether that is Moses, like who's in control here. This fear of the unknown, all the way through as they keep going, and they're leaving unknown. They knew what their lives were like in Egypt, and so when they complain about, like, why are you bringing us out here to die? Like, at least we had food, like we had known things,
We sat around pots of meat.
Right, and so like it wasn't the best, but we knew what was going to happen, and we knew who was in charge, and we knew the Nile would flood every year. like things were predictable, and and now the people that are now Yahweh or Moses, set up as a demigod. Okay, that's who's in charge. That's who we need to follow. We're fine as long as we know who's in control. But now everyone we've been told, is, everyone who's told us that they have this under control is now not here in the camp. They're gone. And so yeah, I think that fear is not necessarily not being in control, but not knowing who is in control. It's like they don't trust Yahweh to be in control. They don't trust Moses. They keep getting, as Craig's pun says, deserted. They're led out into the desert, and then they were deserted. So I don't think it's surprising that they go back to, like, the things that they brought out of Egypt, the jewelry, and the animalistic gods of Egypt, to say, okay, where was the last time we had something where we knew who was in control?
Yeah, thank you. So let me point us to, and I think Wade, this will help even build your case a little bit more. In verse 4, I'm going to read the JPS because I discovered that several of the translations drop this word because I think they feel it is an unnecessary adjective, but they miss the Hebrew pun. And so it's this he took from them and cast in a mold, referring to the jewelry, and made it into a molten calf. So that word molten calf, the Hebrew there is also the same word for a mask or a shield. And so the rabbis read that as they built this calf as a shield. And so this goes back to that fear thing of that God to them seemed too unpredictable, too willing to make a big move that they were uncertain about, and so they preferred something more tangible. I think, David, you mentioned it earlier about just being able to see Moses. And so all the things about God really seemed big to Israel, as we could imagine. Could you imagine being in their situation? You just experienced a sea parting. You just experienced that sea collapsing against your enemies. You've experienced, water from a rock. You've experienced a pillar of fire and smoke. You've experienced all of these things that seem way beyond anything that you could understand, comprehend, or control. And so you want to make something that is understandable. And so I'm not sure that I would, and Wade, I don't remember if you used the word particularly, but understandable. I'm not sure that it's that something is controllable as much as it's something that's understandable. And this point here brings me to why I think this passage is important to us in the current political climate, the current war climate, the current battle against inclusion, the battle against racist statements and ideas and ideologies being allowed and being tolerated. And what is it that we need, or how do we place what we're experiencing right now and use this section of the text as kind of a way to think about this stuff? Like, what is it? How does this challenge us? How does this challenge us? And what should we take from this and learn about our own current situation and how we go about thinking about processing and dealing with this stuff?
I think oh shoot. I think we still, well, I believe I still fear God.
Mm-hmm.
So but I believe in God. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand how I have a point to say, but I can't think how to say it.
That is the worst feeling, Janet. I know that one.
I'll try to think about it as people talk.
Please. Yeah, I fear God and empire. Good, Craig. So tell me more about that. How is this? And I realize that it's a little bit abstract. And so I'm asking you to do a little bit of heavy lifting here to think through this. But what's the important thing? What do we do? Do we build golden calves to shield us from what's going on? Paul, go ahead.
So I think like there's a kind of a lot of nuance around the idea of fear here, because like on the one hand, you've been talking about, and I mentioned as well, like how afraid the people were of God, and at the same time, like in the passage where the people are afraid to like go up the mountain and stuff with God, like God gives them reasons to be afraid. He's like, well, don't come up to the mountain or else a lot of you are going to die if you do. And so like there's kind of this tension here of like there should be like a reverence for God, but at the same time he's also giving them like, this is what you do to not be afraid of me. And they don't do those things. They pursue other ways that wind up kind of being pretty counterproductive. So I think for a lot of what's going on in our current situations, there's a lot of reasons to be afraid of things. And that doesn't mean that we should be careless or that we shouldn't be concerned about a lot of what's going on. But at the same time, you know, there is still a lot of trust that we should be placing in God. Not to say that like we don't do anything about any of the situations, but you know, that we still rely on him and things like that.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
I'm afraid of our leaders, and I'm afraid to be a leader. Because if I'm a bad leader, I have a lot of examples of why I can't be a good leader.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What are some golden calves we've built recently out of fear?
Nuclear missiles.
That's an interesting take. Yeah, I think you can make a case for something like that, especially since the intention is not to ever launch them. So they really are meant to just be a shield, so to speak. So I'm going to give you one, and that I believe deeply is a golden calf, and that's Donald Trump. Trump was what religious people in the US, because they were afraid that the world that they wanted or they believed that they were supposed to experience was a desert. And they were scared. They didn't know how they were going to survive it. And they felt threatened on all sides. And so they get something that comes along that becomes a shield from the hard trek that was going to be requested and asked of them. And so they replaced God with something far less than God. And I think our right wing, religious right wing behavior, and if you read the language around Donald Trump in a lot of those settings, it has very demagogue type language. And what ends up happening, what is the danger of that? I'm not saying what is the danger of Donald Trump. I don't want to go down that road. I'm asking, what is the danger of creating something like that? What happens?
Well, first of all, I was just going to mention they actually built a golden statue of Trump at one of the conferences like last year or the year before. So that comparison was made a lot when that came out. But I would say the danger is then you use that as a substitute for God. So you use either the idol you've created of a person or the idol you've created of an ideology or whatever, as like that is this person is God, rather than, you know, this person might have a line to God or something like that.
I think I can't speak for other places, so I'll say American politics in general have this ability where, whether it's on the right or the left, you know, because we have a primary system that we usually end up with two people running, that person therefore has to represent everything that we've said, you know, like they can no longer be a person because they have to be the embodiment of a concept. And that's pretty much, I think, what a god is these days. Lowercase g, is an embodiment of a concept. And so I think, one of the fallouts of this is, things like national politics become prevents us from doing things locally, where we might actually have more of that control, or know, or to be able to see how God has entrusted us to change things, and so, that's just one thing that I notice about politics, is that during the primary season, you've got a lot of different personalities and ideas and approaches, and then once a candidate is selected, they become the embodiment of that party, and therefore all of that diversity of approach and opinion gets reduced to, well, I have to back this one way or another, and so.
Right. So let me maybe create a more succinct expression of this when we think about it with the golden calf, and kind of what you were saying, Wade, is in the scriptures, humanity is made in the image of God. When we make an image or an idol, we are making it in the image of humanity. Now, in this instance, it's a calf, which is something that man has dominion over. And so the danger of a golden calf, the danger of us making modern day golden calves, is that we call them a god, and we say that they hold the characteristics of God. But the problem is we created them in our image. And this is a really dangerous thing, because our image is not the full image of God, right? I believe that each of us have the opportunity to reflect the image of God in the world, but it is not the image of God. And the danger every time that we put something or someone up on a pedestal that represents God, then they either have to, as you were mentioning, Wade, speak for all of us, or have to reduce this idea of faithfulness, this beauty of pursuit of godliness, down to its lowest common denominator, which then leaves so much room for unhealthy behavior and harm. This is the danger, in my opinion, is that fear makes us more susceptible to creating a shield or a golden calf. And then that golden calf reduces the value of God to such a degree that then there's all kinds of room for evil to exist and persist unchecked under the guise of a molten calf. And I think we do it all the time. I think we do it in small ways. I think we do it in big ways. I think we reimagine God in our own image often in order to get our way in certain situations, or to diminish someone else. I think it's very dangerous. I think it's very, it makes us susceptible to losing track of what we're actually pursuing. Right. In fact, a lot of churches, I would argue that in a lot of churches, the more progressive the church, the less closely held the scriptures are to that church. Because the scriptures, in some ways, the interpretations of those scriptures have in themselves become a golden calf. Think about it. There are people that can read the scriptures and say, it's okay to be racist. It's okay to be misogynistic. It's okay to be homophobic. It's okay to be Islamophobic. The scriptures tell me so. And it's because they have taken the treasures of God, melted them down, and made them into their own golden calf. And a lot of that begins by anti-Semitism. And it's the anti-Semitism that exists in our reading of scripture that allows us and gives us permission to reject the Jewish understanding of things, to help us have a clearer picture of how it was always read or always interpreted. And instead we get to dismiss that with a replacement, because many Christians would say Moses has been missing for a long time, and so we just replaced him with the New Testament. Now, I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying the New Testament in and of itself, but the way that we have interpreted the New Testament outside of the Hebrew Bible is the danger. It's what allows us to do and say so many horrible anti-Semitic things. It's what allows us to do and behave in such a way for us to be able to dismiss people, determine that my denomination is the only right denomination, and if you're not in my denomination, then you're destined for eternal damnation, right? Those are all the things that we've allowed to be this molten calf. Any thoughts about that? Sorry, I got preaching there for a second. So any questions or thoughts about that? Any concerns, any pushback that you don't agree with me? Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So I think you were talking about kind of like Trump and like him being like a buffer. And I feel like a lot of what we see with people that are like looking to different politicians or people in that way is that it winds up making it to where they, going back to like the, making God in your image thing, like they wind up going against the things that God teaches. Like Trump has this kind of rhetoric that reinforces ideas that are racist and homophobic, things that would go against what it means to love your neighbor and by extension to love God. And so I think that the kind of fear that causes people to look for a replacement is the same kind of fear that causes people to look down and further marginalize people that don't adhere to that ideology or just in different circumstances in general.
Yes, absolutely. And, not to play the whole, it's both sides, but, even during the Obama presidency, the drone killings of innocent people around the world, that like when we build an idol, when we build a golden calf, we don't like to question its flaws. Why? Why would we not question the flaws of a golden calf? And I'm talking about physical golden calf. Say we build a golden calf that was to be our God. Why would we not want to question any of the flaws of it?
We'd be wrong.
Well, we're the ones that created it. So we don't want to question its flaws, right? And I think that's what we see so often in politics, is that people are unwilling to question the flaws of the person that they have propped up as the leader, because we created that leader, and to question the flaws is to admit our own flaws. Does that make sense? Any other thoughts on this? Thank you, Paul. Those were great thoughts. Any other thoughts on this and why it's important for us to be thinking about this?
It's not directly a thought on what we were just talking about, but when you were talking about us being created in God's image and then creating, or the Israelites creating a golden calf, kind of being this 2 times removed from the image of God, and not reflecting the fullness of God. It immediately made me think of Romans 1, where Paul is talking about, in that context, he's talking about people that exchange the full glory of God for idols, which are formed in the images of men and birds and 4-footed beasts. And so, anyway, I think I have a lot to think about there, because because basically the way Paul's using it is to then first get all of his audience to condemn the heathens with him, so that he can then, in the next part of his letter, say, kind of pull the so now you feel fit to judge. Well, aren't you guilty of all of the same things as you were just looking down on these people for? And so anyway, a lot to think about there as we're asked to question what we have made into idols, because it's really easy to kind of look and say, oh yeah, these people make this into their idol, and this is the consequences of that. That's the whole end of Romans 1, is him saying the consequences, and then Romans 2 coming in and saying, okay, but what are your idols? Where have you, you from your position of knowing the true image of God, of having scriptures revealed to you, what then do you say, yeah, I don't like this, or I want more control, or I just want to know who's in control and I feel like my life is out of control now. So what do I do then to create, to try to create that God that will lead me or provide stability when I'm not trusting, and I'm not patient, or I'm not listening to God because God is telling me something that I don't want to hear.
Yeah. Wade, I don't think you're doing this, but just for the conversation's sake of discussion around idol worship and stuff, is that by the time of Paul, idols were very different than in ancient time, like prior in the Hebrew times. They became, idol worship was the most sadistic, horrible, masochistic worship things that existed in Roman times. It would make us cringe, the stuff that happened in settings of idol worship, which is why Paul differentiates a lot between believing in other gods, having more than one God, and idol worship. And it's always separated out because the idol piece there. I do think I want to make a quick clarification in case it isn't clear. A lot of times growing up in the Christian church, I was taught we make idols out of money, we make idols out of fame, we make idols, like, what are the idols in your life? What I really hope that we hear today is something different than that. It's not what do we make an idol, but what are we creating in our life to shield us from what maybe God really has in mind for us, and how to live and how to care for people, how to be welcoming and loving and have empathy and demonstrate this unending grace to the world. Because I don't know about you guys, but I often will say that I build little golden calves to give me reasons why I don't need to love everyone. I don't need to love my enemy. I don't need to love my neighbor. I don't need to demonstrate kindness or generosity in certain situations. I come up with all kinds of reasons of why I shouldn't, and it's actually even godly for me not to do this. Right? I'm sure you've all heard of people who are like talking about godly way of giving to someone that's panhandling. And it's better to not even give them anything sometimes. And like, I'm not sure that that's accurate. That's more so something that we want that to be true. And we want to ignore that flaw in our golden calf because we don't want to actually give something. We don't want to actually care or be generous. And so what are those things that we're doing day in and day out? And the thing that's really fascinating to me, and then we're going to wrap up here, is they took something of high value, the booty of Egypt, that they took out of Egypt, the thing that represented their overcoming the oppressor, the thing that they took the wealth and the affluence of the oppressors in Egypt, and they used that almost as permission to create a golden calf. And I think we do that a lot. I think we take the things that we say, well, I worked really hard for that, or I overcame something for that. And then that gives me permission to create something that is less than the God I am called to follow. And we declare it to be a God that brought us up out of Egypt. We declare it, we make that fake news. This is what brought me out of Egypt. This is the thing that saved me. And I think we do it a lot. Any thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
Just a thought about that would be thinking about it in terms of what did they take from their oppressors and then what did they do with it?
Yep. Because guess what we're going to find out is that they're supposed to do with it. Remember? What were they supposed to do with it? Sarah taught on it last week. Make a sanctuary.
The ark, right?
Yeah, make a sanctuary. Make a safe place. And instead, so some of them used it to make a sanctuary, and some of them used it to make a God in their own image. And that's powerful. And I think that's what we're left with, Wade, right? What are we doing with the valuable things we've collected in life? Are we using it to build a sanctuary, or are we using it to build a God in our own image? And as Sarah defined sanctuary last week, a safe space that welcomes all and protects all for the benefit of them and the community, right? So, all right, anybody else? Last second thoughts. Just be careful what you say because it'll get me talking again, and I know. All right, let me pray over us real quick. Lord, you are so good, and I'm so grateful that you are willing to put up with, forgive, and all the other things that go along with that. Show empathy towards us in all the different ways that we try to recreate you in our image instead of being recreated in your image. May we be a community that's about being transformed into your likeness as opposed to transforming you into ours. Lord, I love you. I think that you are there for us. I think that you believe deeply in the faithful in this world. May we live up to those beliefs. May we be a people that overcomes oppressors, that fights against all the isms in the world that want to distract us from loving our neighbor. Lord, may we be a people who wait patiently for Moses, that we are people that wait patiently for you. Lord, I love you. I praise you. I give you all the glory. Amen.